Welcome, advocates, to another episode of the Lead in Equity Podcast, a podcast that focuses on supporting educators with the tools and resources necessary to ensure equity at their schools. Today's special guest is Ulric Shannon. So without further ado, Ulric, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure's all mine. I'm excited about today's topic. It's probably a topic that is, I would argue, I'm back and forth with this these days as far as the timeliness of today's conversation. It's always been around, and I have this conversation every now and then with folks, so I'm excited for it. But before we get into that, I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself and what you currently do.
I'll try to keep this short as I can. I may look young, but I got a lot of work history. But I think most important, I started my career as a third grade teacher here in Chicago, and that's kind of where I got the education bug and proceeded to work in a lot of different spaces, from large nonprofit organizations, leading into the teacher pipeline because we need teachers across this country. Worked for Chicago Public Schools Central Office, leading their family and community engagement work. And prior to my current role, which I'll speak about in a minute, I launched an organization called Liberated Way, where we supported schools and districts around the country and reimagining what school could look like alongside with their community. So completely community-driven approach, which came from my time here at Surge. And I'll say my first connection with Surge was I'm an alum. I'm a proud alum. I've gone through the process. I've gone through our 10 sessions, and I was called back maybe 4 or 5 years after I did the program to come back and now currently serve as the executive director of the Surge Institute in Chicago.
All right, I love it. So tell us about, you said you're the executive director. What does the Surge Institute do?
We are a national nonprofit organization that supports Black and Brown leaders, and I'll say energizing them around the work, elevating them, and having some space for education as well. That can be through principals, teachers, school leaders, lawyers, folks in the education ecosystem who impact young people in whatever way that they can. But here specifically in Chicago, we are the flagship program of the organization, as it all started here in Chicago by our founder, Carmita Saman. It is a 10-month cohort-based experience that connects, accelerates, and empowers these leaders of color. It's really what I like to say is a journey that they go on in a collective group, where they do learn some executive skills and they also learn how to navigate complex systems. But it's really about the vast network that they get, mission-driven leaders of color who understand and support each other. And so we've seen that type of community really launch careers, launch change in a really positive way in our schools, in our organizations, in our community. Yeah, so that's Surge.
All right, I love it. And just so I'm clear, do you have to be in the Chicago area? And you said that you had to identify as a person of color?
Yes. And well, for our flagship in Chicago, you must live in the Chicagoland area, but we're also in DC, we're in Detroit, we're in Philadelphia. We have alums in Oakland, Indianapolis, Las Vegas. So we are all across the country taking up space with our 444, almost 500 after this class graduates of alums across this country.
Nice. Okay, cool. All right, well, let's get into today's topic because, like I said, I have this conversation every so often, just as the time goes by, and we're in the United States. We are in a space where our presidential has eradicated, or there's this push to end DEI efforts, and so as a result, folks, DEI, and let me say it out because they got me just giving the letters. Hold on, let me back this up. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is under attack. See, they got me. Anyway, so I kind of want to start with your take as far as what you're seeing, especially in your area, things that you're doing, the work that you're doing, your organization is doing. What is your take on the state of diversity, equity, and inclusion these days?
What we know is that systems don't change unless leadership changes. And so we're trying to get folks in a room to fight these fights that are not new. We could call it any acronym, any word. This has always been happening since, Black folks has entered into this country. And so what we do know is that if we look at our ancestors, their resilience, their power, their truth has lasted through every single type of fire. And we know we'll show up on the other side of this with a lot of learning. But for us, it's not politics, it's people. It's really about ensuring that those folks, those educational leaders, really reflect the students and the families that they serve, because what we know is truth. It is fact. Where students improve academically, holistically, is when they have a diverse set of leaders in front of them. We need them in this work. And we're looking at long-term systems change, and that doesn't happen individually. It happens as a collective. And we have to recognize some of our responsibility in that space to be able to dream of what actually the outcome of, DEI it is. It could be our compass, but it's not the goal. The goal is liberation and justice. And so we can leverage that, but no fight against the word.
All right, I like that. So I've said this before. I think sometimes it boils down to a matter of semantics. You change certain words. I've said this before. It's like, you say diversity, you say differential instruction, that seems to be acceptable. You say equity, certain that causes people to go a certain direction. But you say belonging, and that seems to be okay. So it's to me, it boils down to semantics. I was just having a conversation with a colleague earlier last week, and the conversation was centered around what are you doing, right? Because diversity, equity, inclusion is a challenge. Your company, my company's leading equity center, it's part of. And so I was just saying, like, I think at the end of the day, we can all agree that we want our students to be successful. And that we recognize, I think whatever your political stance is, we can all recognize that some kids need more than others. There's different pacing and whatever it is. Why can't we all agree that let's just give the students what they need in order to be successful? So from what I'm hearing on your end is the letters have been around. These things have been out there. It's still there. We're going to keep moving forward. Okay. How does this backlash from diversity, equity, and inclusion impact our Black and brown educators out there?
Well, maybe I'm not like everyone, but there's a fear. There's a nervousness. Change is hard for anybody. I think this happens with anytime you have an election, and maybe it's not the person that you want win, or maybe it's different from your thinking. So there is some fear that exists across organizations as they're trying to navigate the new times. They're trying to navigate new demands and new structures that are coming super fast. But personally, for me, this is probably energizing for me. Like, it is a reminder of like why I do this work. Why do I need a community? Why do I do a lot of reading? Why do I want to bring these type of folks together? Because I know I can't do this alone. It's going to take time for the type of change that we want to see in this country. I mean, we can look at organizations who backtracked on their missions and received backlash that are not even in the education space in corporate America. So I think folks, everywhere are feeling it, and it could change day to day. Like, there are times when I may look at the news and I hold my head, and then there are days I'm like, okay, I know some people who can like help us navigate this or fix this. It may not be today, but I'm already starting to think of like, how do we continue to bring the Jengas together? Because we can't be expert at everything, but to unravel some of what we may feel is chaos or deconstruction or dismantling, we have to do in order to protect our people and the work that we do. But it also should give a little bit of a fire to funders, to nonprofits, to education systems, to cities, mayors, to stand in your courage. You said on the campaign trail, you said it when you got the superintendent job, you got it in this leadership role, stand in your truth. And I promise all together we'll make it through. So every day could be a little bit different for different folks.
I got you. All right. Now, one of the things that stood out in your response was you mentioned that you feel energized. That's probably something I haven't heard someone in our space say, but I think you did a good job explaining it. I think sometimes we get, as an educator myself of color, I get asked a lot of questions from folks who are not of color. And so they'll ask me certain things, and I find myself being a spokesperson. I have a question in regards to what kind of tools are you preparing our Black and brown educators to maybe respond to, microaggressions, or when they feel tokenized, those kind of things. Like, what kind of tools, tips can you give in response to these type of areas?
We have what we call spirit, heart, hand, and head work. And I think what you're speaking to is our heart work. One, it is the ability for us to manage our emotions in service to a greater good, a greater purpose. And so when we may feel that little like this microaggression or this thing, or like, why do I have to explain this to you? It is really about us being able to just manage that feel, because maybe their intentions are pure and they do want to help. They want to be more than an ally, right? They want to be a co-conspirator. And so our folks do a lot of training, from negotiations, from some of the greatest professors in this country. We have change management, we have communication, we have branding, we have project and program management. And so they're getting a real holistic like learning opportunity. But then we also into the space of what we consider spirit, which is the ability to see and articulate the benefits for our people for the long term. And so that comes out in freedom dreaming, which most programs may call a capstone, but ours is really about like where can you lean into your genius, your brilliance, your passion to with your own brick changing the system. So you don't have to have all the bricks, but what's that one? And I will say that is probably the most challenging simply because people do not have the space to get creative and innovate. And so being able to articulate that even in the space of like where it may feel like a tension or a challenge for our white counterpart to just have questions, them being able to articulate what does liberation and freedom actually mean for all people through their own lens, their own experiences. And then we have, like I said, handwork, which is really about bringing our people together, enabling them to collaborate. And then head is about recognizing, even in these systems, that we individually and collectively can play a part in that, but thinking about how they can affect the results that we want. I think when we get the chance to sit down with people where emotions are controlled, then we can actually learn a lot from folks if our hearts are open to do so.
I got you. All right. Can you share with us maybe some examples of some strategies that our folks of color can, navigate some of these conversations? Like one of the things you mentioned was like explaining what liberation means, or like I want to give some examples to the listeners out there as far as some strategies and talking points maybe that you can share.
I think the easiest, what we share with our fellows is one, stand in your truth. Like stand in your truth. Only you have your life experience. Only you live in the space in which you live and have some of those experiences. So like you need to just at this time, stand in your own truth, stand in your reality, and share that with people. We might be shocked that people actually want to hear your story, hear your journey, and hear your why. And we also just ask you, like, this is the time to run. This is not the time to stand still in fear. This is your calling to release that genius and that brilliance to run in this space and think about how you can impact this space positively, no matter where you live in this country. And sometimes you got to hold other people to help them and be their healing space. But I think it is also healing for you to dive deeply into something that you're passionate about that can counter where you may or may not feel attacked. That's what I'm asking you to do right now. Like, you don't have to be in education to make a positive impact and change in your community, but this is the time to fight like hell too. And I think in the words of the great Kendrick Lamar, we're going to be all right.
Oh, love it. All right. I like how you did that one. I like how you do that. That was good. Okay. All right. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit, because I have, as we mentioned before I even hit record, I lived in Idaho before I moved to Phoenix, and I have found myself had to do my actual job duties, right? And then I found myself being a mentor to other Black students. I saw myself doing advocacy work to bring awareness, because it seemed like I was the only one who's really noticing things. And I know a lot of educators of color are finding themselves doing additional work that they're not being paid for, but if they don't do it, who will, right? So a lot of my multilingual folks are having to translate in Spanish and all these different things. And again, it's not something that they're compensated for. So I want to shift gears to burnout, because it is something that can happen, after a few years, because again, I got to teach, got to plan lessons, I got to grade papers, and be an unofficial mentor, if you will. So what strategies can you give to keep our cups filled so that we're still in this, fight, but we're also taking care of ourselves as well? What kind of strategies could you give to us?
Wow. I think our previous Surgeon General gave us the best prescription for the country during this time, and that is community. I think finding your people, finding your space can totally be healing. That could be in your school building, like your colleagues, all right, your families. They may be your own personal family or group of friends. Get some time with them, spend some time with them. Not talking about the work. I mean, I know that it's extremely hard inside of schools, and I give it up to every principal, every teacher, because really no matter what you do inside of a school right now, it is hard. It is extremely hard and tiring. But I also think it is when you feel that calling, like really no matter what you do, you're always going to be tired. There's never going to be a perfect time for anything. As a millennial, I was sharing with my coworkers and the cohort actually that I think I've experienced everything. Well, I should just be tired because of living on earth. I mean, I think about 8th grade, it was Columbine. My mother was terrified for me to go to school, thinking anybody with a trench coat was gonna pull out a gun. Then we had 9/11. Like, I'm sitting inside my classroom watching this. I graduated from college during the Great Recession. And like, there were no jobs out there. Like, then I graduated from grad school. I come back there as, the housing market crash. And so then we had COVID. And so like all those things are gonna come. And like, you gotta find your direct and right practice of healing and self-care, whether it's that vacation or playing Sudoku. Like, if that takes your 5 minutes, just doing something to take care of yourself. I've recently got into running. I'm supposed to run a marathon this year. So we'll see.
You're supposed to. All right, I want to hear, like, this is being recorded, right?
Yeah, I know.
It's got to happen. So when is your marathon?
It's in October 18th, the Chicago Marathon. And so I just found that running, one, has given me another community. There are Surge alums that I run with regularly, and that's a healing space because it's just, you kind of zone out. When I run along, I feel accomplished when I get home, and then I can start my day. So whether it's the Peloton, running outside, we just maybe need to touch some grass to feel that way. If it's a sound bath or massage, do your big one to take care of you because you know how you need to be taken care of. So community and your own path to self-care.
All right. Yeah, I was going to ask you, what is your self-care? I had a guest, a good friend of mine that talks about the self-care plan and the importance of having a self-care plan, not in reaction, but just as like, you don't want to wait till the last minute, right? When you're like done and just the world is coming down on your shoulders, but you want to be doing things to maintain yourself. And I think that's something I took that advice. And so now, I like to hit the gym. I like to go roller skating, those kind of things. Or I'm not going to run a marathon. That's
okay.
I almost say that. I almost said something. That stuff is not for me. Okay, so I respect.
It is not for everybody. But you actually got me thinking. In our sessions, we actually have a session on capacity. And oftentimes people think that you have a capacity for work and a capacity for your personal life, and they go together.
Yeah.
And I think it's a simple practice for you or for anyone. Maybe not running, but sitting down and kind of writing down like what's pulling on me right now, right? Like if I'm 100%, there may be times when my partner or my family is just getting on my nerves, right? And that's like a lot of extra burden, capacity that I may not have for work during that time. And then there may be like a board meeting or a big report or a project that you're finishing up, like that's going to pull away from capacity at home. And so maybe like a good practice that our fellows also do is like at the beginning of the week, take a moment to write down and see all the things that you're holding. And where do you want to put that other 25? Can you reduce some of that capacity in one area that's not like giving you life during that time and pour it into something else? And so just taking that moment to not jump into the week and jump into and run throughout the week, but just taking a moment for yourself to really think and create a Venn diagram or whatever you need to say, like, where's my capacity? Where do I want it to be? And what shifts can I make to get me back to a more balanced space? So you don't got to run. Just take out a pencil and some paper, and that's a much simpler activity.
I got you. All right. So I heard community, and then also I'm hearing journaling as well. And it got me thinking because I'm a very, people don't believe me, but I'm very introverted. And so like me going to go find community is not always thrilling for me.
Yes.
However, being in my thoughts and just kind of having that one or two small group interactions is always helpful for me. I'm not going to necessarily run to a big group space of individual. It's just not necessarily my thing. However, I do find it important to have these kind of conversations with colleagues. Just one-on-one is about where I'm at. What is more for you, Ulric? What is kind of like your go-to? Are you more on the journaling side? What's your go-to?
I'm certainly on the community side, and my top 5 is Woo. Yeah. I love to be in to be in a room with people and talking and learning about them and what they do and what gets them excited. I get energy in that space. Communication is in my top 5. So I love to be in spaces with people, learning about people, building together, thinking together. It is certainly a healing space because I also will sit in my head. And like actually hearing other people maybe voice their frustration or voice their win is like, okay, I'm not crazy. Like other people are feeling the same thing I'm feeling today. They're going through the same thing I'm going through. I will also say it's funny that communication and woo are my top 5 because those are things that I actually shelled early in my career because I would always get checks on my report card as a kid because they said I talk too much. And then I actually had an interview where they said I got the job, but they later told me that like you almost didn't get the job because you talk too much. And so I would shell myself even though I was fighting against my own innate and natural gifts and talents. And that's actually one of the things that I got from Surge is like actually lean into your natural gifts and talents. And for me, just wooing and working rooms and being in community with people is healing. It's natural. It doesn't feel like a lift. And then I go home and I can sleep well. It's fine when I get home. Like maybe a little overextended my woo, but yeah, it is. I'm certainly a community person.
I think harmony is my number one.
Okay,
I'm big on teamwork and let's come together kind of thing. That's my thing. So I that's probably why a sense of belonging is so important to me these days. It's just I didn't have a name behind it. It was just like once I did my strength finders, I was like, oh shoot. Harmony just kept popping up and it made a lot of sense with a lot of like my ideologies, my mindset when it comes to leadership. But I'm glad you're in a place where you feel like you can be yourself. I'll tell you this, Ulric, I have learned a lot with this conversation in regards to where we're at with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also just some support for our folks of color. I mean, what is it? It's like 3% of colors. I don't know. The stats are just really low when it comes to our representation out there.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, men are only 2%, Black men are only 2% of the entire teaching population and could be quickly fading. I mean, I know like organizations like us struggle to get more Black men. It's just simply because one, there's not that many. And two, folks of color are often more afraid to ask their employer to support them financially through a fellowship or extended continuous education. A lot of organizations may not provide that or have the ability to. Some are actually cutting back right now simply because they are watching their budgets because of the market, because of political challenges. And so I would always welcome people to any Surge event, to come to our website to learn about what we do at Surge. So check out surgeinstitute.org. There's lots of information. Lots of our programs have open applications currently, but also to like join this movement. And like if you don't have the time, you may have the treasure or you may have the talent. And so whether it's you becoming a speaker or hosting a Surge event at your business or whatever, you can also join our impact community where you can give as little as $5 a month and up to as much as you got per month to really help folks who want to do fellowships and programs who may not have the financial means to do so. And I'm really always proud to share that 75% of any dollars raised at Surge 75% of that always goes directly to program. And so a very small of that goes to, administrative things, back of house stuff. But we want to pour directly, strongly, heavily into our people because like you said, this work is hard. They're exhausted. And I don't want to create this a burden when they come to any of our sessions. They should feel comfortable. They should feel loved. And feel like they could just be with our presenters and facilitators.
As we wrap up, why don't you give us any final words of advice to our listeners out there?
I know that times right now may just feel very tense and split, but what I want you to understand is that given that we all want our children to succeed, if we feel that currently like education is political, like we need to reevaluate our values. It's the work of diverse leadership rooted in community for the greatest impact of all young people.
Thank you. And we'll definitely leave links in the show notes, folks, as well. Ulric, it has truly been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.